apologies for these technical difficulties. It is a learning process, and I've got somebody assisting me today, so we're trying to work out some bugs. Some things happened that wasn't expected at the last possible minute, so anyway, we got it worked out at least well enough to be able to do the show for you. But anyway, this week I wanted to talk to you about some stories. Some stories that I was reminded of due to an event that took place on Friday when Geoff Castelucci did a premiere of his version of a particular song, and that song triggered some memories for me. But before we get to all that, here's a brief word from our sponsors.
I am Taliaferro, and on April 9th, I will be bringing my beautiful madness to Generation Championship Wrestling in Tampa, Florida. And I am coming, courtesy of Twisted Minds Escape Room. At Twisted Minds, you can enjoy a family-friendly test of your mind and skill as you face one of the many challenges offered, such as Camp Calico, Diggers, Vanished, and coming soon, a new twisted adventure full of mayhem. So come, join me and my beautiful madness in Generation Championship Wrestling in Tampa, and then treat yourself to Twisted Minds in Palm Coast, Florida. Like me, you'll be able to say that I lost my mind at Twisted Minds.
Welcome back. Alright guys, that event's actually taking place tomorrow, so if you happen to be in the Tampa Bay area or going to be there tomorrow, stop by, check out the wrestler, give him your support, and at some point, make sure you take a trip down to Palm Coast, Florida, and take advantage of Twisted Minds escape rooms. Those are some of the best, if not the best, escape rooms in Northeast Florida, and if not in the entire state. Believe me, when you go and you do these rooms, you're not going to be disappointed, especially if you're an escape room enthusiast. You're going to love the rooms at Twisted Minds. They're extra special down there. Some serious thought went into creating those rooms, and the personnel and the people that run it are just absolutely fabulous, and they will help to make your experience extraordinary. So with that said, let's get on with some of the stories here. Like I said, Friday, Geoff Castelucci did a premiere of his bass cover for John Denver's Country Roads, and that triggered some memories for me that I wanted to share with you this week. So without further ado, let's go ahead and watch that video from Geoff Castelucci.
Almost heaven, West Virginia, Blue Ridge Mountains, Shenandoah River. Life is old there, older than the trees, younger than the mountains, growing like a breeze. Country roads take me home to the place where I belong, West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home. Country roads, all my memories gather round her, miner's lady, stranger to blue water, dark and dusty, painted on the sky, misty taste of moonshine, teardrop in my eye. place where I belong. West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home. Country roads. Well, I hear her voice in the morning hour. She calls me. The radio reminds me of my home far away. And driving down the road, I get a feeling that I should have been home yesterday. Country roads take me home to the place I belong. West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home. Country road, country road, the country road. Take me home. Oh, take me home to the place where I belong. West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home. Country road, the country roads take me home to the place where I belong. West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home. Country roads take me home. Country roads take me home. Country roads.
Sorry about that, folks. We're back. I don't know if you saw in the chat I put in there. We're having some technical issues with the chat again, and we're getting some confusing stuff going on with some other stuff. And now we have dogs in here barking. Anyway, so Geoff Castelucci, incredible guy, amazing voice. A range of 4 octaves on that man is just absolutely incredible. Now, that's not the same as what I'm about to tell you about with Grandma having the Sweet Adelines come over to the house to practice their singing and stuff for the competitions. If you guys aren't familiar with Sweet Adelines, they're actually a women's chorus group that does singing competitions, and it's a national thing, so they go all over the nation. If you've never been to one, I highly encourage that you go. It's incredible to see. It's really awesome to watch. But Grandma used to have her Sweet Adelines come over to the house, and they'd hang out and practice doing their songs and stuff. And Country Roads was one of those songs that they used to practice a lot. It's actually one of my fondest memories from that age range of 2 to 6 years old, which then turned around and reminded me of another incident. But the funny thing about the Sweet Adelines coming to the house and practicing was, it started off, I used to sit in Grandma's lap, and I used to sit there and just stare up at her. And then it got to a point where I started getting passed from lap to lap throughout the practices. I got heavier, and somebody needed a break. So I'd end up in everybody's lap going around the table, just sitting there, and at each one I'd stare up at them, just in complete awe and amazement and mesmerized by what was happening. Until finally one day, Grandma had me sitting in her lap, and I was staring up at her again, and all the ladies at the suite from the Sweet Adelines kind of gave her a nod to let her know I was doing it. So then she looked down and saw me staring back up at her, and she said, "Grandson, what are you doing?" She says, "You're making us nervous and keeping us from being able to concentrate. What are you doing?" And I responded, I said, "Trying to figure out where the angelic sound is coming from." And they all just kind of laughed. And then Grandma asked me, she said, "Well, what do you mean by that?" And I said, "Well, when you guys are here," I said, "I hear this angelic sound like it's coming from heaven, like it's this heavenly sound, like angels are singing. And I'm trying to figure out where it's coming from, because I can't figure out if it's coming from you or if it's coming from somebody else or where it's coming from, but it's beautiful." And everybody just went, "Oh," you know how that happens. But yeah, it's a fond memory. I miss those days. I remember that very vividly, as though it were yesterday. It's just, to this day, it still amazes me as how beautiful it sounded when they were there singing. And like I said, that triggered another memory, a memory that hits a little closer to the heart, um, of Vava, my great grandma. That's what we called her, Vava. And Vava used to have me sit on her lap when she was out on the swinging hammock chair on the back porch, and she would sit there and sing Portuguese songs. She would sing French songs. She would just sing to me on a regular basis, and I forget the name of the song, but one of those songs was a song where she would sit there and pinch the back of my hand just very lightly, just like so, just enough to grab some skin and pull it up. Um, Never really actually hurt me, but when it got to the last note of that song, this is where she got me, right? She'd be sitting there pinching, singing the song and stuff, and then all of a sudden, boom, she would slap the back of my hand. She taught me how to play slapsies. That's what that was. But, as young as I was and knew it was coming, I could never, ever beat her. Every time she would make contact with that hand, every time, no matter how fast I tried to pull away. Oh, just many, many, many laughs and giggles over that one. It was a precious time for me, very precious time for me. And well, before I get into the rest of that story with Vava, let me set some framework for you guys. Just to give you an idea, I don't know if you can see it on my screen, but there's a page and a half worth of information here that Mr. Alvin Swanger sent me, related to just my branch of the family with Vava and my grandma, and it tells their story, and it's an incredible story. It really is. Just thinking about it now and thinking about the things that Vava went through, the things that she did, the things that she accomplished, the way her children turned out, the way my grandmother was, is just absolutely amazing. And in reality, I went through most of my life not knowing some of these things. Um, I mean, I knew them in some ways from having known them and personally interacted with them, but I didn't really know some of the history, largely in part because I didn't really ever think to ask. Um, but now I have even more respect and even more love and more adoration for both of them, knowing what I know now because of the information that Mr. Swanger was able to dig up and provide for us. In fact, He went back a lot farther than what I ever thought possible. In fact, he's actually dug up information on our family that dates back to before Christ, all the way back to the Visigoths. Some of the history on it is a little vague and a little foggy and hard to track. But we know the Visigoths started somewhere in Central Africa, and at some point they migrated up into the Nordic areas and intermingled with the Vikings, and then from there they went out east, out into Hun territory, mingled out there, and then somewhere along the way ended up in Spain. And that's where we started having some accurate enough records to really pinpoint things down to specific individuals. And Mr. Schwanger followed that track all the way out and brought it up to a current day for our relatives that actually were ended up being located and living and residing in Madeira in Portugal. Which brings me, to make a long story short, because I don't have all that information and I don't really have enough time to share it with everyone right now, but I'm going to bring you up to the point where Vava enters the picture. And she was born, I want to say, in January of 1894. Now, when you think about that, that's kind of mind-boggling and blows me away. It's amazing to sit there and think that one of my relatives that I knew in my lifetime and got to experience face to face was born in an entirely different century. I mean, we're talking that's over a century ago. It's amazing. I mean, we're talking about basically 127 years ago was when Vava was born. That just it blows my mind to sit here and think about it right now. But I say that she was born in 1894 in Madeira, and in a little town called Santo Antonio. And this is also the same little town where my grandmother was born. And in just a moment, as soon as my producer comes back from trying to quiet down the dogs, I have a few images and stuff that I want to show you in order to put some things into perspective, and show you some stuff about that. But yeah, she was born there. She ended up getting her passport there in 1920. My grandma was born there, and when I was 10 years old, my grandma took me to Madeira, and she took me to the house where she was born. And with the exception of some updates in the wine pressing, the house was exactly the same as when she was born. Things were still lit by candles. The water was still supplied by aqueducts. The wine press still had the capability of doing the whole manual foot stomp, which kind of takes me back to a memory of a I Love Lucy episode where they're in there foot stomping the grapes and stuff. Well, my family did that. And it amazed me. And when I saw that, even as a 10-year-old boy, I had to know what that was like because I had seen it on I Love Lucy, and it was like, whoa, that's got to be crazy. It's got to be weird. It's got to feel weird. But I went through the whole process, the washing the feet, putting the booties on, and all of that. And I said, yeah, but this doesn't feel quite the same. I want to feel the grape squish in my toes. So they took the boots off, warned me that my feet would be purple for a few weeks if I did it. And of course, being 10 years old, I didn't care. I wanted to find out what that was like. So I jump into the press vat and start running around, stomping on the grapes. And I tell you what, boy, that was uh, stomping on those grapes. Boy, you had to be sure-footed because otherwise, boy, that was slicker than snot on a doorknob. You could slip real quick and fall and bust your butt and have grape juice all over you everywhere. But never mind. It just all the same. It was a fascinating process to watch, to see the grapes be picked, to see their preparation, to see them go into the press, see where it came out, see the whole process of where they stored it and everything like that. It was amazing. And just to see the house in the same condition, lit by candles, um, and to see the floor was still dirt. There was no tile, no concrete. It was a dirt floor. I got to see the bed that grandma was born in. And these are things that is is hard experiences that are hard to come by nowadays. And they're experiences that I personally am very grateful for. But let's let's get back onto Vava. Um, and let's in order to put some things in perspective, let's talk about Madeira for just a few moments. Um, this is the Madeira flag. This is a flag that Madeira flies. So um, my my housemate, who's also acting today as my producer behind the scenes, helping me with the lower thirds and doing all this stuff and transitioning between the different images and cameras and all that. Um, She actually painted this for me when she found out that I was from Madeira and gave it to me as a birthday present. And that was another one of those moments that brought a lot of these things to mind. And I absolutely love my housemate for that. She does a lot of other type painting type stuff as well. And some of her work is pretty awesome. Maybe one day she'll put some of it out on social media, and some days, maybe you guys can see some of it. Um, but yeah, so that's the Madeira flag. So let me show you on the planet where Madeira is and give you an idea of how small of a place that we're talking about and where my family comes from. So on the left hand side of your screen, up in the upper right hand corner, is where Spain and Portugal is. The yellow outline there actually outlines Portugal. And then in the bottom right hand corner, you see what's known as the Horn of Africa. And the Straits of Gibraltar are sitting right next to it that lead into the Mediterranean Sea. And the bottom middle left in the corner there, you see a little string of islands, real small islands with some text there. And Madeira is one of those islands right in there, about 60 miles off the coast of Africa there. And basically, it's an island chain that's completely made of nothing but mountains. Now, on the right-hand side of your screen is a closer look at Madeira and the island and how everything is laid out. Now, looking at it as you see it there to the right is the east side of the island, and that points towards Africa. And then if you look down in the bottom in the center, right where there's like a little like new moon looking shape in the coastline, is Funchal. That's the capital. Now, if I remember correctly, Santo Antonio is west northwest of Funchal, just on the other side of that highway there, and a little bit up the mountain. Um, and it's a beautiful little town. And that's where my family is from. That's where Vava got her passport to be able to come to the United States in 1920, and I'll tell you that story here in just a little bit. But if you look up in the upper left-hand corner there in the map, up at the very top, there's a place called Porto Muniz. That is a beautiful place. I know we used to have some relatives that lived there. I'm not sure if they still live there or not. And unfortunately, since we're having technical difficulties with the chat right now, I have no idea, and I won't be able to see any of your responses, but pardon me. But for those of you that are my relatives that are still familiar with who's over there and who's not, when it comes time for the question and answer time, if you could, I'd love it if you'd give me a call and let me know if we still have some relatives in Port Manige. Um, but I just the place is beautiful, um, and I know that at one point we did have some relatives in Port Manige. So if you look in the top right hand corner of your screen, that's Port Manige, and the little white building right down there next to the water is kind of like a I want to say like a resort or like the control point for the lagoon that's there. That's literally a blue lagoon, um, and it was originally created from by lava rock, and our family actually built the concrete around the place and runs that lagoon, and it's kind of like a public swimming area for the area. And this photo is actually taken from the mountain just behind where Port Manige is. And I tell you what, that place is absolutely gorgeous. Now, I want to say up front, all of these images that I'm showing you now and will show you um, are not my images. I did not take these images. They are images I found on Google Images because I haven't been there since I was 10 years old, and unfortunately, all the slides that I have from that trip have come up missing over the years. So one of these days, my goal is to be able to get back to Madeira and be able to photograph all these things personally myself, uh, and retouch with some of my roots, and get to experience this gorgeous place again for myself. It's kind of like a bucket list type thing, but more than a bucket list, I'm determined to make it happen. Um, Up in the upper top left corner of your screen, this is at the top of one of the mountaintops, and I believe this is one of the ones that has the aquifers that helps collect the rainwater. And this is one of the control points where they send the water out through aqueducts that are actually still working, unless that's changed since I was there. But it actually feeds water into the aqueducts, which then feeds it down into the communities lower in the mountain. But in each one of these places, well, in several of the mountaintop areas, you'll find places like this where there are benches and overlooks where you can actually look out over the tops of the mountains. And as you can see here, on the right days, the mountains actually get up into the clouds, and then on some days, the mountains are above the clouds. And boy, I tell you what, that is an amazing sight when you're up at those mountains and you're looking out around and you see that. And on a crystal clear day where the clouds are even higher, you can see all the mountains in 360-degree views that would just take your breath away. It's just, oh, it's an amazing place. In the bottom left-hand corner, what you're looking at there is a photo from the main shore of Madeira, looking out over the eastern point that points back towards Africa. And you see some of the other islands that are part of the Madeira chain there. And then in the bottom right hand corner is an example of some of the more traditional style homes that exist on the island. And it's down in this nook, just all by itself, but up the hill a little bit outside of the view of this photo, there is actually a little village that it's connected with. And if I remember correct, in the old days, this was actually a small fishing village that, pardon me, provided fish to that town further up the hill there. But it sits next to what's known as the tallest and steepest vertical cliff shore in Europe. And I wish I had some photos of that, but it is absolutely amazing to see it. It's incredible. If you guys ever make it to Madeira, I highly recommend taking one of those tours and getting to see that cliff and getting to see this little area from a boat. It's amazing. And in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen now is a photo of one of the mountain paths that go up the mountain, as well as one of the aqueducts that are still functioning today. This is one of the main aqueducts, which is why you see it so deep and thick with the concrete. There are others that when they go through the town, they're much smaller, but those are usually meant for like specific areas, and people would get their waters and stuff from that. And our family vineyard used to be watered by one of those aqueducts. I'm not sure if it's still that way or not, but I know when I was there and I was 10 years old that it was still working, and I actually got to see the water flow down and realize, wow, that's actually still working. But in the bottom right hand corner shows another one of the paths that go up the mountains. And as you can see here, it's hard to tell from this photo, but it's a pretty steep climb. But when you get to the top of these mountains and the top of these paths, and you get to see the views that are available from the overlooks that they have, absolutely incredible. It's just amazing. It's so worth the climb once you get up there. Tiring, but it's so worth the climb. In the upper right hand corner is a small example. Now I forget what the name of the town is or where this was at, but when I was there when I was 10, I remember coming to this place, and it blew my mind away, because this is part of the Mayfest in Madeira in Portugal, where, if I remember correctly, they're celebrating like their independence, or like celebrating becoming a nation. I forget the exact details on that, so if any of my relatives are watching, when it comes time for the Q&A, please call and let us know, and let me know exactly what that is a little bit. But yeah, this was for Mayfest, and this is one of those things where they bring out fruits, vegetables, traditional clothing, do traditional dances, have traditional music, and you really get a taste for the old world, so to speak, and what it was like through history, and the customs and the traditions that they've passed on throughout the years. And it's so colorful. The music is so beautiful. The dancing is incredible. You really got to check that out if you ever get a chance to make it to Madeira. Now, this place I specifically remember because Grandma told me about passion fruit. Now, when I first saw passion fruit when I was 10 years old, it did not look appetizing at all. I was like, that is just nasty looking, Grandma. I do not want to eat that. And then she said, well, I think you'd like it because you love strawberries, and this is very similar to that. Not like the kiwi fruit, but it's similar. I think you would really like it. Just try it. Would you try it for me just one time? And I said, okay. So I had one, and oh my goodness, guys. That passion fruit is so good. Oh, it is so good. The rest of the trip, I kept asking for passion fruit, passion fruit, passion fruit. I want some more passion fruit. And it was when we came to this place during the Mayfest that I was first introduced to passion fruit. And it has stuck with me ever since. So, but on with the story of Vava and Grandma. Now that you guys have a little framework of where my family comes from, In the left part of your screen, second from the right, is Vava. That's my great grandma. Next to her, second from the left, is Grandma. I'm not sure where that is, but I'm so thankful and so glad that we have this photo. Because to be honest with you, it's been 44 years since Vava passed away, and her face has honestly faded from memory. And if I didn't have this photo, I wouldn't be able to put that face to my memories. And I think that's part of the reason why I'm so passionate about photography, because photography still has a place. It still has a valuable place and a viable place in all of our lives. And if it wasn't for photos like this, yeah, faces fade over time. But the important thing is who the people were, what they did, what their relationship was in regards to you personally. So it's just amazing, just truly, truly, truly amazing to me. In Vava was an incredible woman. I told you guys that she was born in 1894, and she got her passport in 1920, and Grandma was 2 years old in 1920. So Lewis Crawford had already come to the United States. That was Vava's husband. I believe they got married during World War One, and he served, I forget who with, but he served in World War One. And after the war, he decided that it was time to get a new start. And so he came to America, got some stuff set up, got things ready. And then Vava, when Grandma was 2 years old, got their passports, and then got on a ship, came to America, went through Ellis Island, and obtained their citizenship, and then joined Luis in Massachusetts somewhere, and he was working in one of the stone quarry labs there. And from my understanding, and what Alvin has sent me and told us, is that Luis ended up passing away when he was 45 because of, I guess it was like some chemical dust or something that from the mines. So that left Vava as a widow. And it wasn't until, I want to say, 1950-ish or so, thereabouts, that she married again. And she married an artist. But for a period of roughly 20 years, she raised 4 children on her own. Now, Grandma was 14 at the time, so I'm pretty sure, based on what she was like and what I know of Vava, that Grandma did a lot to also help raise the other 3 kids. But she raised 4 children through a 20-year time frame through sewing. She was widowed, she had no income. She started sewing for people. People brought things to her to repair them. She made brand new things for people. But she found a way to make it work, and she found a way to support 4 kids for 20 years. Through the Great Depression, during a time that things in America weren't quite as hospitable for women, but she did it. She made it happen. And that is, I mean, I can't even imagine what that must have been like and what kind of weight that was on her shoulders. But she took it on and she bore it up and she made it happen. Um, and she passed that on to grandma, and she passed that on to all of her children. Because when I look around and I see what they accomplished, it was absolutely amazing. I don't know all the details in the others, but I know with grandma, she she went to college. She got a degree, I believe. Um, but I do know that she spoke 7 different languages fluently. One of those was a rare diplomatic um, language known as Esperanto. Um, and then I also know that she spoke Portuguese. I think she spoke Spanish. I know she spoke Italian and English, and there was a couple others in there somewhere, but she spoke them all fluently. And it was just it was amazing to think that and know that. And for a while, Grandma, I believe, participated in some of diplomatic affairs, acting as a translator using the Esperanto. Uh, and that's just, it's fascinating to me how Vava could find herself in such a position, stay positive, stay nurturing, raise those 4 children, and do it all through sewing. I, I mean, it amazes me, the work ethic, the determination, the mindset that she must have had in order to pull that off and still be loving to her children and raise them in such a way that they would be as successful as they are in life. Um, so with that said, let's talk about some of the other images on that other page. There we go. On the far right, there, the image on the top and the bottom. Um, I know they were taken in New York. I'm not quite clear. I forget exactly when. I'm not sure if that was when she was in college or when that was, but that's my grandma. And I believe, uh, well, I don't even remember what the time frame is on that. Um, but in the middle there, that's me on the shoulders of my Uncle Buddy. In that picture, I believe I was about 3 or 4 years old when that picture was taken. And that's Grandma sitting down at the kitchen table, or at the dining room table. And behind where Grandma is, I don't know if you can see it, but there's like the outline of a lamp back there. And just to the right of that, I you can't really see it in this photo, but that's where the swinging hammock is, um, that that Vava and Grandma used to sing to me on. And it brings back a lot of memories for me seeing that photo. And that's the dining room table that the Sweet Adelines would sit around and do their practices and sing songs like Country Roads, where, as I told you before, I would hang out and stare up into their mouths, trying to figure out where that angelic sound was coming from. Now, in this image, you'll see 3 generations of my branch of the family. And it amazes me that we had 3 generations alive at the same time. Um, I know sometimes we can get 4, but that's just, it's mind-boggling, and it's a beautiful thing. And the upper left-hand corner is my grandma and my grandpa. And it's amazing because as I got older, people used to say all the time that I was a chip off the old block when it comes to Grandpa, that I was the spitting image of him. And I believe my mom still has the photo, but there's a photo of me with Grandpa, I want to say when I was 20. And looking at the two of us, you would swear that I was the younger looking version of my grandfather. We looked so much alike, especially after I started getting my flat top from my time in the Army. We really looked alike then, because he kind of had more of the old-fashioned crew cut, but I went with the flat top. And if he'd have been my age, we probably would have looked like twins. I mean, that's how much alike we looked. But that's my grandma and my grandpa, and that's three of their children. To the left there in Grandpa's arms was, I believe, Uncle Bobby. He passed away in a trucking accident when he was 24, and I never got to meet him. But I was told that when he passed away, he was 6'7" and still growing. That was a big boy. Now, over on the right-hand side, there next to Grandma, is my Uncle Ronnie. And then in her lap is my mama. Now, based on my mama's age there, I'm going to guess and say this photo was taken roughly about 1950, 1951-ish time frame. So I love these images, and if it weren't for these photographs, these would be little pieces of history that we just wouldn't have, and we wouldn't be able to appreciate. And I mean, seeing these things, seeing their stories, it truly does make me far more appreciative of what we have today. In the picture next to that one, in the center there, is my grandma and my grandpa. They're on the left-hand side there. Grandma's directly behind Grandpa there. And then if I'm not mistaken, I want to say that the gentleman in front, now don't quote me on this because I may be wrong here, but I think the gentleman in front and then the lady on the far right there are my godparents. And I believe that was taken in New York during World War II. So it amazes me how far back in history the relationships in our family went. It's incredible, and I love having these images and seeing this stuff. On the far right there is Grandma with all of the grandkids. Oh, at the time that the photo was taken. There's me on the left of Grandma in that light blue shirt, and then there's my cousin Carl, Ralph, I believe that's Cheryl, and I'm not sure which one it is that Cheryl's holding. It's either Cheryl or Renee. I can't remember. But I don't remember who the baby is that she's holding. I'm pretty sure that the little guy there in the red shirt is my cousin Paul. And then I believe that's my cousin Candy that Grandma is holding. I'm not sure about that one either. Maybe my Uncle Ronnie can fill me in on which ones those are if he's watching. But in the bottom left-hand corner there is literally 3 generations of our family in one photo. That's my grandma on the far right, my mom in the middle there, my Uncle Buddy sitting down, and then standing behind me is my Uncle Ronnie in the back, and then that's me when I was 10 years old. And the shirt that I'm wearing is actually a shirt that has a map of Madeira on it, and that's what tells me I was right around that 10 years old range. So I might have been 11 there, but it couldn't be too far from it, because I got that shirt when I went to Madeira with my grandma, and it just, again, it brings back memories. And if it weren't for these photos, some of these things would probably fade over time. And that's one of the, again, that's another one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about photography. Um, but yeah, I just think back to those precious moments that I had with Vava, and it's just amazing. I know I only have the one memory of her sitting me in her lap on the hammock swing and singing Ferrajaka to me. And for those of you who don't know that song, it's actually a French song. And the words to it are Ferrajaka, Ferrajaka, dormez-vous, dormez-vous, sonen la mattina, ding dong ding, ding dong ding. And essentially it's basically, little brother Jack, are you awake? Are you awake? The alarm is sounding, ding dong ding, ding dong ding. That's kind of the gist of the song from what I understand. But that was the one that at the end, when she was doing the ding dong dings, that she would slap the back of my hands, and and learn the whole slapsy game on that one. But the only other memory that still resides in my head when it comes to Vava was the day that my mom and my grandma sat me down and told me that Vava wouldn't be singing to me anymore because she had gone home. And I wasn't quite sure what they meant by that at first, but then Grandma reminded me of the time that we had watched The Greatest Story Ever Told, when I asked her why the people in the movie were so mean to Jesus when all he ever did was help people and intended and did good for people. And why didn't they understand who he was? And that's when she shared the gospel with me. But when she reminded me of that, that's when I realized that Vava had gone to heaven. And that's when I realized that I had lost my Vava. My rock during that time in my life. And I was only 6 years old. And to this day, I can take you to the house that we were living in, and I can drive you down the route that we took to the funeral home where we had the memorial service for her. I remember it was beautiful. I remember seeing her face in the casket, even though nobody wanted to let me see it. But I remember seeing it. But I also remember during that drive to the funeral home, I remember just staring out the window, being quiet, not really saying anything. Mom and Grandma watching me closely from the front seat. I'm dressed all up in, what, if I remember this correctly, I think it was like a sky blue or like a baby blue suit they dressed me in for the memorial service. But I remember staring out the window and watching as various places in Jupiter, Florida went by, driving next to the train tracks there, and thinking to myself that nothing in this life is permanent. no matter how good, no matter how bad, nothing was permanent. And after the memorial service that day, I don't really recall a whole lot after that. But that trip to the service itself, I remember pretty well. Now, if I were to get back to Jupiter and able to find the cemetery where Vava was buried, it's also where Grandma is buried, and I believe they were buried right next to each other. I could probably get you pretty close to where their graves were. Now I can't remember the exact spots, but I could say I could probably get you pretty close. That's how vivid those memories still are in my head today. Which speaks to how much of an impact Vava had on me. Even though we were only together for 6 years. And that's kind of the point of me doing this program, Shooting Straight, Living Life in Truth. Because too often, with the people around us, we have a tendency to look at the forest and forget to look at the trees. And it's those trees that are the moments where Vava has you in her lap and she's singing Ferzaka to you. It's those moments when you're sitting in the sweet Adeline's laps and hearing those voices. It's those moments of sitting down at the dining room table and having hot dogs with mustard and lettuce for lunch. Just because it's Grandma. It's okay, you know? It's those moments when Grandma saw a 6-year-old boy sitting on a hammock swing, gazing off into space, thinking about Vava. You're missing her. And Grandma intuitively knowing that's what's going on. And then coming over to that hammock swing and sitting down next to me and saying, I love you, grandson. Picking me up, setting me in her lap. And guess what she sang to me? Ferzaka. And some of the other songs that Vava used to sing to me, to include the one where she pinched my hands and slapped it at the end of the song. But those trees are the trees that make the forest of who we are as people. And the only way to truly live life and live it in truth is to be able to see the forest and the trees. And that's really what Shooting Straight, Living Life in Truth is about. It's hopefully to inspire and encourage us to go beyond the superficial and really live life. Because life is short. It's here one day, gone the next. And we need to maximize those moments. So with that said, I want to share with you 4 of the many life lessons that Vava and Grandma taught me during that 2 to 6 year time frame. One is that there is a God, and He is omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, and He loves me. 2, nothing in this life is permanent, good or bad. It's only here for a season and then passes away. The third, love has multiple sides. It isn't always sunshine and unicorns. Sometimes it's difficult, and there is an accountability aspect to it. And I say that because Vava and Grandma, as loving, as nurturing, and as caring as they were, and as tender as they were, they darn sure wouldn't take any guff off of anybody. And they would put you in your place quick, fast, and in a hurry, and it didn't matter who you were. They didn't take no guff. They were strong and yet tender. And that's what makes them so special in a lot of ways. And that's one of the things that I learned from them, was that love isn't always those sunshine and unicorns. Sometimes it's hard, but it's still love. And it's the best kind of love. And the fourth lesson that I learned from them was the fact that they set the definition for me for what a strong woman is and the real beauty of a strong woman. And with that said, I'd like to open it up now for the question and answer time.